Today we're taking a look at two different lenses from Sigma, the 28-45 f1.8, which is made for mirrorless mount cameras like the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K that we're filming on right now, and also the 24-35 EF f2. Now, these lenses are very different. The 28-45 was just recently released, and the 24-35 f2 has been around for quite some time. However, both of these lenses are full frame, and I want to use one of these lenses here in the studio. So these tests really came about from me wanting to pick which to use not only as a studio camera, but also to be able to leave on this camera when I want to use it as a secondary camera out on set. I also want to give a special shout out to B&H as they lent me the 28-45 in order to do these reviews. So if you are interested in picking up anything discussed in today's video, make sure you click the links down below, and thank you again to B&H for sending this out. First, let's talk about the differences in the lens. Now again, they're both full frame lenses, but the 24-35 you have to use with an adapter if you're not using an EF camera, which most of us aren't these days. So I'm using the MC21 in order to use this lens on the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K. With the 28-45, it's made for mirrorless mounts, so you can get it in either the L mount or the Sony E mount. So you don't need an adapter when using it on any of those camera bodies. However, that did actually surprise me with one small situation packing my bag for a shoot recently, where the 28-45, because you don't need an adapter, is just slightly too long. So it actually takes up more room in my backpack because I need to put it down long ways instead of packing it more efficiently. Where the 24-35, I can just pack it the most efficiently, but without an adapter. If I put an adapter on there, it has the same problem. So that was one unexpected difference between the two lenses, but minor if you're not really traveling with your gear. There are also custom buttons on the 28-45 that you can't use with the Blackmagic, but if you're using it on a Lumix camera body or a Sony body, you can map those custom buttons where the 24-35 does not have that. A feature that the 24-35 has over the 28-45 is there's actually a manual dial where you can see where you are physically focus-wise on the lens, which is really great if you need to make sure you're actually focused at infinity or focused in a specific area. You can see that physically on the lens, whereas most of the modern camera bodies don't have that ability. So if you luck out and your camera can actually show you where you are on the focus plane, cool. But I just want to note that because when I'm shooting with anamorphic adapters, I need to be at infinity focus, and it's harder to do on the 28-45 than it is the 24-35. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's video, the image quality from both of these lenses. Now they're both surprisingly really good. I mean, for the price, you'd expect the 28-45 to be really good, but for how cheap you can get the 24-35 used, it really handles itself pretty well. So before I show you the footage, just to explain how I did it, I shot at all f-stops and then went through the focal range. So first you're gonna see 28-245 at f1.8 just on the 28-45, and then you're going to see 24-35 compared against 28-245 at every f-stop from f2 to f4. So you'll see 24 just by itself, then you'll see 28-28, 35-35, and then 45 by itself on the 28-45. And I'll do that from f2 to f4 just so you can see how these lenses look as they're shot wide open and as you stop down. Now, as you can see from the footage, the 24-35 really handles itself pretty well, but the major difference is going to be the bokeh. If you need the most shallow depth of field possible, the 28-45 is the clear winner here in the bokeh department. Also, the bokeh just looks better, especially some of that circular bokeh you see in the background. It's just a lot more circular on the 28-45. On the 24-35, in certain situations, it's a little more cat-eye-ish, so you don't have those nice, beautiful circles all the time, but you can get them on this lens. And even right now, you know, it's not showing up that much because of how close my fairy lights are to me. You can get nice looking bokeh out of this lens. It just depends on where things are in the frame. The main difference I see between both of these lenses is slight, and it has to do with the skin tones. I do think the skin tones are slightly warmer on the 28-45, and they do look slightly more pleasing. But again, that comes with the price difference. So if you're looking to get the cheapest lens possible, I think the difference in the image quality isn't that big of a deal when it comes to the 24-35 to the 28-45. I think the biggest difference is going to be, do you need 24 or do you need 45 when it comes to actual focal lengths? But there's a bigger difference when it comes to autofocus. One of the things I noticed is the single touch autofocus on the Blackmagic on the 28-45 is more responsive than the single point autofocus on the 24-35. I would suspect that if you're using the 24-35 against the 28-45 on L-mount cameras like the Lumix S5 IIX, or you're using it on Sony cameras, I think the 28-45 is going to overall perform better. It's also much more silent. So if autofocus is a really big deal, the 28-45 is going to make way more sense. But the 24-35 is no slouch in that department. It's part of the reason why I ended up choosing the 24-35 as my studio lens and ended up sending the 28-45 back to B&H. The main reason is just the image quality difference wasn't that big of a deal for me here in the studio. I'm lighting everything, and the price savings is huge. I was able to pick up the 24-35 used on eBay for $400, where the 28-45 is sitting at over $1,300, around $1,340 on B&H. So there is a huge price difference. This lens is, if you want to say, close to $1,000 more than the used 24-35. It's a huge difference. So it depends on what you're going to use it for. I also think if this is going to be your daily driver lens, the 28-45 makes more sense. It's more modern. It's going to last you longer in the grand scheme of things, where the 24-35, especially if you buy it new, it's 10 years old already. So this lens is starting to age out, but there's a big difference when it comes to adaptability. I can use this 24-35 on pretty much any camera at any point at this point in time, now that everything's mirrorless. All I have to do is adapt it, whether it's L mount with the Sigma MC21, E mount with the MC11, the RF mount with their RF to EF adapters that work fantastic on Canon cameras. The 24-35 being an EF mount lens just makes it more versatile. If I want to use it on my Red Komodo, my Sony FX30, I have all the adapters and I can use this lens across all of my camera systems, where I'm just using the Blackmagic right now as my studio camera and as a secondary camera. So as I thought about it, investing, over $1,300 in a lens that I'm just using here in the studio, the price increase and the image quality difference just wasn't enough for me to sacrifice the versatility of a 24-35. I'll be using the 24-35 as my main lens to test multiple cameras against each other just because it's full frame. And I can't really do that with the 28-45. I'd have to have multiple 28-45s. And I have a test coming up here soon testing the Blackmagic against the Red Komodo on the Axonar Star Trek fan film sets, which I'll talk about more in a future video. But I needed a lens that could work on all of the cameras. 24-35 makes a lot of sense. I just couldn't even do the 28-45. They don't even make that for the RF mount, so it just wasn't quite fair. And I also noticed that when I did the 28-45 against the 18-35, putting the 18-35 on the Red Komodo and the 28-45 on this Blackmagic on one of my earlier tests, it just wasn't quite fair. Again, kind of like with this lens, I was testing a full frame modern mirrorless lens against an older crop censored lens. And although the 18 to 35 is a solid lens, it's just not quite the same. And so I wanted to be able to have one lens and make the variables as equal as possible and as fair as possible testing lenses. So for me, the 24 to 35 won out, but it really all depends on your situation. So if you have any questions about the 28 to 45, the 24 to 35, let me know in the comments below. And if you got knowledge and value out of today's video, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos from the channel. Until next time, thank you for watching as always. My name's Jeff Fagien, and I will catch you in the next video.